So yesterday we started learning about shapes, and we talked about how some shapes are polygons and some shapes are not polygons. And polygons are any shapes that they're closed and have only straight sides. So a circle cannot be a polygon. An oval cannot be a polygon. And I told you that today we were going to focus even more on shapes. In addition to just learning about polygons, we are going to learn about types of polygons. And one type of polygon that we're going to look at today are called quadrilaterals. I want you to look at all of the shapes on this page. And I want you to think about what all of these shapes have in common, because all of these shapes are quadrilaterals, and there is something about them that is the same. I'm going to give you a moment to see if you can figure that out. What is the same about all of these shapes? Okay. Well, if you noticed that all of these shapes have 4 sides and also 4 angles and 4 vertices, you are correct. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. You get it. The idea. This odd shape still also has 4 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. All of the shapes on this page have 4 sides. So quadrilaterals are polygons that have 4 sides and 4 angles and 4 vertices. Doesn't matter whether the sides are the same length or whether they are a shape that you recognize easily, like a rectangle here, or whether they're kind of an odd-looking shape. No matter what, if they have 4 sides and they are closed, they are a quadrilateral. Now, that part seems pretty simple, so let's do a quick practice. On a piece of paper or dry erase board, I want you to list the letters that belong with shapes on this page that are quadrilaterals. So just write down the letters on your paper that are quadrilaterals only. And then we're going to review which ones are quadrilaterals and which ones are not. Okay, so let's go over this. Shape A. 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. That's a quadrilateral. Shape B. 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. That's also a quadrilateral. Shape C. That is not a quadrilateral. It's not even a polygon. It does not have 4 straight sides. It has people argue that it has 1 curved side or 0 sides. You can kind of argue both, that a side has to be straight in order to be a side. But regardless, it's not even a polygon, so it couldn't possibly be a quadrilateral. Shape D. 1, 2, 3 sides. Not a quadrilateral. So triangles are not quadrilaterals. Shape E, this star. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 sides, not a quadrilateral. Shape F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides, not a quadrilateral. Shape G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 sides, not a quadrilateral. Shape H. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sides, it is a quadrilateral. Shape A, B, and H are all quadrilaterals. The rest are not. Okay? So, now, here's where it gets a little bit more complex. So, there are different types of quadrilaterals, because to be able to just say that a shape with 4 sides is a quadrilateral, that's great. But there's lots of different kinds of shapes that have 4 sides. And so we have to be able to distinguish between them. So I have a little handy chart for you. And this is not all of the quadrilaterals that exist in the world, but we're going to learn about 3 types of quadrilaterals in 3rd grade. There's actually more types of quadrilaterals than just these types. But in 3rd grade, we're going to focus on these 3. So let's take a look at my chart. Okay? So, you may have heard of a rhombus before. In order for a shape to be a rhombus, it has to have 4 equal sides, which means that all 4 sides have to be the same length. That's all that has to happen in order for a shape to be a rhombus. Okay? You've obviously heard of rectangles. Rectangles have to have 4 sides as well, because remember, all quadrilaterals have 4 sides. The other thing about rectangles is that they have to have 4 right angles. And we've learned about right angles. Right angles are shaped like L's, right? You could put a square right inside of them. So rectangles have to have 4 right angles in order to be considered a rectangle. And they have to have 4 sides. Now, here's where it gets a little bit trickier. A square is a special type of a rectangle because it has 4 sides and it has 4 right angles just like a rectangle does. But the special thing about a square is that all 4 of its sides are equal. So you can actually say that squares are rectangles. They're special types of rectangles. Now, that does not mean that rectangles are always squares. A rectangle is only a square if all 4 sides are equal. But squares are always rectangles. Okay? Now, to throw another wrench at you guys, we're going to talk a little bit about how a square is also a rhombus. It's a special type of a rhombus because it has 4 equal sides, right? Just like a rhombus does. So a square is a special type of a rhombus because the special thing about a square is that it has 4 equal sides, but it also has to have 4 right angles. Okay? It also has to have 4 right angles. And I'm going to make sure that I make a note of that because even though it shows that up here, I want to make sure you understand that it does have 4 right angles as well. So, squares are rhombuses, just like squares are rectangles. But rhombuses don't always have to be squares. Because a rhombus can have 4 equal sides, and it can just not have 4 right angles, in which case it would just be called a rhombus, but it wouldn't be called a square. Hopefully all of this wording didn't totally confuse you too much. We're going to look at some examples together, and we'll talk about it. And this might help clarify as well. So let's look here at this chart that I made. All right. I want you to first look at this rectangle section. Okay. Now, I have a rectangle right here. And I took that rectangle and I rotated it so that it was vertical like this. Still the same shape, I just rotated it. Shape has not changed. I then took that shape and I rotated it over a little bit so that it was on an angle. Still a rectangle, no matter which way I turn it. So I want you to think about that. A shape will always stay the same shape even if I rotate it. It doesn't change the shape. Just like, for example, this piece of paper. This piece of paper itself is a rectangle. I know that it's hard to see because I have it zoomed in so far. Okay, it's a rectangle. It's still a rectangle if I put it like this. It's still a rectangle if I hold it like this. So keep that in mind. Even if it's rotated, it's still the same shape. So these are all rectangles. Okay? These are also all rectangles. They're just really skinny rectangles. And you're going to notice that I put these here as well. These squares are a type of a rectangle. So you can actually call these a rectangle, even though they are also a square. Because remember, squares are also rectangles. Okay, and that's why I put those there so that you understood that these squares are also rectangles. Because in order for a shape to be a rectangle, it has to have 4 sides And it has to have 4 right angles. And as you can tell, all of the angles in this square are right angles. Alright, now let's look at rhombuses. So typically when you think about a rhombus, you're going to think about a shape that kind of looks like a square that has been slanted. Okay, that's kind of the way my brain thinks of a rhombus. I kind of think of a rhombus as like someone took a square and they managed to slant it towards the side and lean it. And that's kind of what it looks like. Because in a rhombus, all 4 sides are the same length. So if I took a ruler and measured them, they'd all be the same length. Okay? And so that's what makes this a rhombus. And I can take this rhombus and I can rotate it. It kind of looks like a kite, but they're still both a rhombus. Okay? Now, these are not squares because these angles are not right angles. This angle here is an acute angle. And this angle here is an obtuse angle. They are not right angles. So you can't call them a square, but you can call them a rhombus. Now, these squares down here, they are squares, but I wanted you to know that they are also a rhombus because they fit the requirements to make them a rhombus. They have to have 4 equal sides, and they do. All 4 of the sides on a square are equal. So they are a type of a rhombus. They're just a special type of a rhombus. Just like a square is a special type of a rectangle. Okay, now, last but not least, we can just have a column of squares. And all of these are squares no matter which way I tilt them. So I can just kind of keep moving them around and they'll still be a square. And these little ones as well. They have 4 equal sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they have 4 right angles. So all of their angles are square angles or right angles. Same here. Even though it's tilted, these are still right angles. You can make little squares in them, in the corners. Now, I can refer to these squares as rectangles because they are. It's just that rectangle isn't as specific as a word for these. So instead of calling it a rectangle, I'm still gonna call it a square because it's a special type of a rectangle. I could also technically call this a rhombus because it is a type of a rhombus. But again, a rhombus is not as specific of a name for these as a square would be. So let's see how well you do on this. I want you to number letter your paper. A, B, C, D, and E. And then I would like you to pause the video. Write down the type of shape that you think each of these are. And if it has more than one name, write down all of the things that it could be. Now, of course, we know that they're all polygons and we know that they're all quadrilaterals. So you don't have to state that. We know that they're all polygons. We know that they're all quadrilaterals. Okay? I want you to also write down their more specific name. Pause the video and then press play when you're ready to review. Okay, remember, if you didn't pause, please do so until you're done working so that you don't see the answers yet. Shape A. Okay? It has 4 sides. It has 4 right angles. All 4 sides are not the same length, though. So it's not a square. But it is a rectangle. Okay? So you should have written down rectangle. Shape B. Okay? It has 4 right angles. And all 4 sides are equal in length. They are the same length. So that makes this a square. That's the specific name for it. I could also say that it is a rectangle because it's a type of rectangle. And I could also say that it's a rhombus because it is a type of a rhombus. But the most specific name for this would be square. But just know that it is a type of a rectangle and it is a type of a rhombus. Shape C, just like shape B, is also a square. That's the specific name for it. Okay? You could also call it a rectangle, and you could also call it a rhombus. It has 4 equal sides, and it has 4 right angles. Shape D. Shape D is a rhombus only. Okay? It is a rhombus only. It has 4 equal sides. They are all the same length. But it does not have any right angles. None of these are right angles. So it is not a square. It is just a rhombus. Shape E. Shape E is also a rhombus. It's flipped the other way, opposite of shape D, but it fits the same requirements. All 4 sides are the same length. I'm going to write down rhombus. Okay, but it does not have any right angles, so it's just a rhombus. It's not a square. Today, for your Google form, you're going to be identifying some shapes. If you see a shape that is a square, you don't have to tell me that it's also a rectangle and a rhombus. I may ask some questions about that on a different question just to see if you remember. But if you see a shape that's a square, you don't have to call it a rectangle and you don't have to call it a rhombus. You can just call it a square, since that's the more specific name for it. All right. Good luck, boys and girls.